Well, what's up, guys? How we doing? Good. My name's Paul. I know some of you guys. I don't know all of you guys. But we're going to talk for a few minutes. Is that all right? All right, good. Well, welcome to Grace. We are so pumped that you're here with us. And we're going to jump into a 2-week series called Proud of My Family. We're talking about church. And so if you are a person who's not sure about God, about church, about kind of why we do all these weird things as Christians, and maybe you're checking things out either here or watching us online, this is actually a really great time for you to be here because you're going to hear what's really important to us here at Grace and in the church as a whole. But it is Memorial Day weekend, and so I want to wish you a happy Memorial Day. We take a lot of joy in remembering those who have sacrificed for us, who have given their lives for our freedom. So don't forget that is what this weekend is all about. But we're going to jump right in. So if you've got notes, go ahead and grab those because there's a quiz right at the beginning. I work at a college now, so I'm gonna give you guys flashbacks. But don't worry, it's true-false, okay? It's a true-false quiz. You can take a look at it. It'll be up here on the screens. If you got the notes in the app, you can look at it there. So just circle true or false on this quiz, okay? And the statement is this: I would love it if my family was judged by one person's worst mistakes. Okay, so just circle. I tried to make it pretty easy, okay? I would love it if my family was judged by one person's worst mistakes. I don't know if you have someone in your family. They say every family has at least one person who you're like, I don't know where they came from or what happened here. Now, if you're having trouble thinking of someone, we're not going to talk about what that means. But I think that probably we can all agree that it would not be awesome for us if our whole family was judged by just that one person's worst moments, right? But look at this second question. This is your second quiz question. True or false? I often judge the church, whatever you think that means, by what I see on TV or what I hear about from others rather than by what I know from my own experience. See, there's this trendy thing in the church, which is a weird thing, but it's like trendy for Christians to judge the church by the worst actions of just a few people. And even this past week, maybe some of you guys have seen this, there's a new report out, devastating report from the Southern Baptist Convention about the executive committee of an entire denomination covering up sexual abuse and all of this stuff. It's a huge mess. Okay, and we've had over and over and over again, we've seen these things. And as Christians, we have to wrestle with that. We have to reckon with why this continues to happen. I think part of it is people having way too much celebrity and us worshiping pastors and people who can speak good. Okay? But here's what I think. And I think you know this. I think you know this from your own family. See, your family is not just a series of big events, is it? Your family is not defined by just the graduations or that one time you actually got the Easter picture. You remember that? Everybody smiled. Nobody was picking their nose and people's eyes were open. That was awesome, wasn't it? But your family isn't just what shows up on Instagram, is it? It's not just the birthdays and the trips to Disney and whatever else it is that you do. In fact, what actually makes you a family is all the other stuff, right? What actually makes you a family is that those times sitting around a dinner table talking about whatever happened today. And that time somebody told a joke and somebody, spit milk out their nose and everybody just couldn't stop laughing. Or those endless games of Go Fish, right? Or those times when you got news that you hoped you'd never hear and you just sat there in the living room on the floor and cried together. Those are the things that make your family. It's the little things, not the big things. I had the opportunity just a couple weeks ago, we homeschool our kids, and my wife is the director of our little community of people that gets together once a week to do school as well as we can together and to encourage each other. And so a couple weeks ago, as school was ending, like it was for you guys, we had this end of year celebration, and there was a slideshow with picture after picture after picture, and I got to just sit there and watch all of these ordinary moments, ordinary days with like 5-year-olds under a table, like doing their coloring underneath the table to keep them interested. And this picture of my daughter holding a chicken, And it was field trips, and it was lunches, and it was these things. And I remember just watching this go picture after picture after picture after picture of an entire year of ordinary Wednesdays going, man, I'm so proud of my wife. Man, I'm so proud of my family. I'm so proud of my kids. I'm so proud of the everyday, ordinary little moments of faithfulness. That the houses 2 streets down from the little church where we meet probably doesn't even know that our community exists. They're probably never going to be on the news. But just like your family, that's where church happens. That's where life happens. That's what it really is. And so let me give you a definition, because we're going to spend 2 weeks talking about what's really important to us. And I mean both the church, big picture, and this church. Because our family is huge and worldwide, but it's also right here. Okay, so what is the church? Well, God uses a number of different analogies in the Bible to describe the church, but his favorite one is family. And so the church is God's family, and it includes every person who has trusted Christ for salvation. It spans the globe and it spans time. God loves the church, and he's proud of his family. Now, don't get me wrong, we're messed up. We're a goofy family, aren't we? Anybody willing to admit that? Okay, I sure hope so. We're not perfect, and God knows that. But just like your imperfect family, he's proud of us, of who we are, day to day, every day, in every neighborhood, in every home, where you show up representing him. You know, I had this experience. When I was a senior in college, I was a youth pastor at this little church about 20 minutes from campus, and it was a small enough church that every week after their one service, they would throw some, donuts and sandwiches and bagels out, and the entire church would hang out in their foyer that was about 1/10 the size of ours, and they would eat together and hang out and talk and drink coffee. There were 5 kids in the youth group that when I took it over, I think maybe 7 when I left a year later. It was a sweet little church, and we had some wonderful, wonderful times connecting with that community. And after I left, and for a couple of months before we got married, my wife ended up living with a family in the church. And I remember when we were moving her back here to Colorado, and we were getting ready to get married and all that. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but when we were engaged, we didn't have a whole lot of money, and we were getting ready to move across the country. And so when we were leaving their house, this sweet family gave us this stack of Cracker Barrel gift cards. I think there were like 20 of them. And I tell you what, we ate well on that trip across the country. There was a lot of butter in our lives that week. Last night, the only thing I got an amen for the whole sermon was the butter. I don't know what it is about Grace Church, but we love butter. But that's what it's all about, right? It's ordinary people saying, hey, you know what? You got to eat. And showing up in a moment when you need them. And it was funny when we were going over this on Tuesday, getting ready for this. Rick said, "Would you just thank the people, because there are so many people here at Grace that do that over and over and over again. And you jerks, by the way, never put your name on stuff, so they can't thank you. But the gift cards, the notes, the emails, the phone calls, the messages, the texts, the voicemails that you give to this staff, they go so far. So thank you on behalf of this staff for your encouragement to them." Okay, but that's what it's all about. And there's this beautiful verse in 1 Peter as he's talking about who you are and who we are as a family. He says this. It says, "You're a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation." Underline this part, God's special possession. "That you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light." Now this may be important for some of you. Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. See, not everybody has a family they grew up in that they're super pumped about. And maybe when we talk about this or when there's one of these family sermons at church, you go, oh man, it's going to be hard. Because I don't really have a family, or maybe I wish I didn't have a family. Well, you do. You've got a family. No matter what your blood family looks like, you've got a family. That's what it means to be a part of the church. That's what it means to be a part of the body of Christ, the family of God. You're adopted in, and you belong. So if this is true, there's something I want us to do. I want us to start thinking a little bit differently about the Bible. For the next 2 weeks, we're going to talk about some of our big brothers and sisters. See, if it's true that we're the family of God, then when we read those Bible stories, we should be going, wow, that's my big sister. Wow, that's my big brother. And I had this moment in my life that was kind of fun. I've got a big brother. He's 2.5 years older than me. And so when I was 6, he was way better at all the sports than I was, and I couldn't figure out why. Apparently 2.5 years matters when you're 6 and 8. But I remember he started playing football. And my brother, he's about my size. He's a sort of normal sized guy. In fact, if we stood next to each other, some of you guys would be like, which one's which? In fact, when he shows up here, a lot of people tell him, great job on the sermon. And he goes, that wasn't me. But I remember he was like 9 years old and he was playing football and he was on this great football team, really great coaches, and they made him the center, which if you don't know football, that's the guy in the middle on offense that gives the ball to the quarterback and then usually has to block like the biggest guy on the other team. And so my brother wasn't huge, but he was strong and he had really good technique, so he was good at what he did. And I remember this one game we showed up. For some reason, he went early and we showed up late. And so the game was already going when we got there, and it was really foggy and kind of cold, and so you couldn't really see the field. But the other team, it was kind of nice. We could see them just fine because they had those nasty orange uniforms, like bright orange, like hunters wear so they don't get shot, you know. Broncos are trying not to get shot on the football field, I guess. I don't know what they're doing, but they had these bright orange uniforms. And there was this one kid on the other team. Now, this is my 7-year-old memory talking here, so everybody looked big to me at that point. But this dude, I swear, he was like 6'3", 280. I mean, he was the biggest human I had ever seen in my life to that point. And from a distance in the fog, he just looked like a giant orange pillar on the other team. And I'm like, that dude's going to eat people on the football field. So as we get up closer, I realize he's also right across the line from my brother. Like, he's going to eat my brother. This is not going to be good. We're going to the hospital today. And so I get up there, and pretty soon there's, my brother, and he snaps the football, and he just gets into this kid and keeps him from, getting to our running back. And the running back goes around, and I'm like, and then next play, he does it again. And he's just like working hard. And I remember thinking, that's my brother. Like, yes! And I remember what I thought. I remember in that moment as a little kid going, you know what? If he can do it, maybe I can do it too. And I hope that as we talk about some of our heroes these next couple weeks, you look at these stories and you go, you know what? If she can do it, I can do it too. You know what? If he can do it, I can do it too. So let's jump into this. Because I want to give you just 4 lessons today from the lives of 4 people in the Bible who show us what's really important to us as the family of God. Just 4 examples of the kinds of things that God says we should be doing. So the first one is this. As the family of God, we welcome people who are in complicated situations. We are the kind of family that welcomes people who are in complicated situations. And there's a guy in the Old Testament named Boaz. If you've been around for a while and heard me speak, you probably know I can't get away from Ruth. It's like my favorite book, and I keep talking about it. And if you're getting tired of it, sorry. You need to go read it about 17 more times. It's a really great book. But in the book, if you're not familiar with it, Ruth is this woman. She's from a place called Moab, which is an enemy of Israel. But a man moves there from Israel, marries her, and then dies on her. Okay, so that's the short version of the story. So now she's a widow. She's married a guy who is from enemy territory, and she doesn't really have a home. And her mother-in-law, whose husband has died as well, is going back home to Israel. And she decides to go with her. Something about what she experienced with this family has told her, you know what, maybe I'm going to be able to survive. Maybe there's some hope for me in Israel. So she goes back with her mother-in-law, Naomi. Now, what you need to know is that God planned for this. See, God cares very much about people who are in danger and who are in complicated, messy situations. And so he planned ahead. He knew that this would happen, and he made a rule, he made a law in Israel that when you harvested your crops, whether it was corn or wheat or barley or whatever, you weren't allowed to pick all of it. And if you dropped something, you had to leave it. And he said this, he said, because there will always be people like Ruth around who need the opportunity to do one day of work and get one day of food in an emergency type of situation. And so here's what happens. Ruth and Naomi are there. And remember, she's an enemy. No one in this community has any obligation to take care of her, at least as far as she knows. Outside of what God has said they're supposed to do, she's one of them. So one day Ruth said to Naomi, let me see if I can find someone who will let me pick up the grain left in the fields by the harvest workers. And Naomi answered, go ahead, my daughter. So immediately Ruth went out to pick up grain in a field. She didn't know it was owned by Boaz, a relative of Naomi's husband Elimelech, as well as a rich and important man. So she ends up in this field owned by a guy named Boaz. And so she picks some of the grain over the course of the day, and then Boaz and she end up having a conversation. It says Boaz went over to Ruth and said, I think it would be best for you not to pick grain in anyone else's field. Stay here with the women and follow along behind them as they gather up what the men have cut. I have warned the men not to bother you, and whenever you're thirsty, you can drink water from their jars. So Boaz knows that she's in a very vulnerable situation because any woman alone picking food in a field, everyone knows she has no protection. So this is the kind of situation where she's very vulnerable and ripe for assault. And so he says, don't go somewhere else because I can make sure you're protected. I can make sure you're safe here. And I can make sure you have what you need. You know what he doesn't do? He doesn't say, uh-oh, her life's kind of messy. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I can trust her. I'm not sure she's not going to steal from me. I'm not sure. He doesn't give her a questionnaire. He doesn't evaluate her trustworthiness. He says, hey, you need food and I have some. Not everybody in the story responds this way. See, there's another law, and this is going to sound weird to you if you're not familiar with this, but you need to know that in this world, the most reliable way to make sure that a woman was protected long term was for someone to marry her. Okay, for someone to step up and to say, I will protect her no matter what for the rest of my life and hers. So God gave a short-term solution and he gave a long-term solution. And the long-term solution was her dead husband's family is responsible to make sure that someone steps up. And there was like a long list of men. And they could get together and they could agree and figure out who was going to do it. But someone needed to step up and make sure that she had a home to live in and food and protection for the rest of her life. Okay? So as you can imagine, if you know the story, you can probably guess Ruth and Boaz end up falling in love and it's so cute and they're going to get engaged. But the problem is there's another guy who has this responsibility, and he's a closer relative than Boaz is. And part of this is that all the land that's associated with this is now up for grabs because Elimelech, the husband, Naomi's original husband, has died, and it was his. He was the one who owned it. And so someone stands to make a lot of money here. So there's this guy that now is set up to double probably his farmland and become a whole lot more wealthy, because he's going to be able to buy the land from Naomi so that she can live on it. She can be protected, and he's going to reap the benefit of this. But if there's a woman, if there's a widow, and there are no sons involved, he needs to marry her. So he doesn't know all of what's going on as far as we can tell, but Boaz is going to go to him because he has the responsibility to do so and explain the situation. So here's what happens. It says, Boaz said to the man, Naomi's come back from Moab and is selling the land that belonged to her husband Elimelech. I'm telling you about this since you are his closest relative and have the right to buy the property. If you want it, you can buy it now. These 10 men and the others standing here can be witnesses. But if you don't want the property, let me know because I'm next in line. So Boaz is being completely straightforward. He says, hey, if you don't want it, I'll take it. But it seems like a no-lose golden opportunity for this guy so far. And so the man replied, I'll buy it. And Boaz says, hold on, wait a second. I wasn't done. That's not the whole story. You remember Ruth? And the guy kind of goes, oh, Ruth. Right? Here's what it says. It says, Boaz told him, you must also marry Ruth. Then if you have a son by her, the property will stay in the family of Ruth's first husband. See, you don't get to keep it long term. Once she has a son and he grows up long enough to care for it, it's going to go back to him. So you are going to get a lot of benefit because you're going to get all those years of crop, but you don't get to keep it and your kids won't inherit it. Hers will. So the man answered, if that's the case, I don't want to buy it. That would make problems with the property I already own. You may buy it yourself because I cannot. And there's this moment a little later, and you may not necessarily notice it if you go back and read the story, but at the end, at their wedding ceremony, there's a person who stands up and says, by the way, Boaz and Ruth, remember who you are, and not in a good way. Remember where you came from. See, not everybody is willing to accept Ruth in her complicated situation. And so I got to ask you, have you ever been in a complicated situation? You ever had a time in your life where you're like, man, I hope that this is not the whole story for me. Man, I hope this is not the only thing people know about me, is this one moment right here. And maybe it's because of circumstances that you have no control over, like Ruth. Maybe it's because of your own mistakes. But I want to talk about what we as a community, as a little family right here in Arvada and around the world online do as a church. What is our value that we learn from this? And at Grace, we love no matter what. You guys know we put it on the shirts, we put it on the mugs, we talk about it all the time. It's not just a motto, guys. It's a way of handling other people who are in crisis and who are in need. We love no matter what. We start the way Boaz started. And that's why we have our whole Reach department. That's why we're building that building over there. So this entire community can say, hey, that place and those people, they loved me. And they didn't give me a questionnaire on the way in the front door to figure out if they were going to let me in. And if you showed up here in crisis or in a mess, I'm guessing that's what you experienced. So you need to ask yourself this question. Who needs my stability in their chaos right now? And I want you to write a name down. I want you to think through your life. I want you to pray. Ask God to bring someone to mind. Who needs your stability in their chaos right now? Who needs you to be Boaz because they're in a situation like Ruth and they need you to go, hey, you know what? We're going to make it. We're going to get through this. We're going to figure it out. And I know it's a mess, and I know it's chaos, and I know it's drama, and I know you don't know what to do, but I'm with you. And we're going to make sure that you at least have food and a safe place to sleep for right now. Who needs that from you? Maybe you need to just bring a meal or make a phone call. Maybe you need to bring them here. Maybe you need to say, hey, I know church is like weird and you don't do that, but I'll go with you. Or I'll come and we'll sit in your living room and we'll watch it online together. Or we'll go to Celebrate Recovery together. Whatever it is. Who needs your stability right now? And then secondly, as a family, we seek to be honest with ourselves and admit when we mess up. We got to be honest with ourselves and admit when we mess up. And we got this guy, David. He's our big brother too. And we love the story about when he was a kid and he was like fighting lions and then he, threw the rock at the giant. But David grew up and he became a king. He became a very powerful man. And he made a huge mistake. See, one day he was walking on his palace. He shouldn't have even been there, but he was there and he was taking a walk and he sees this woman, and because he's the king, he can kind of do what he wants, and he has her brought to the palace, and pretty soon she's pregnant, and so he has to cover that up, so he kills her husband, and it's a mess. And he's in so deep that he needs a friend to show up and go, hey, bro, we got to change some stuff. This is not going well for you. And this is what I love about Psalm 51. If you don't know Psalm 51 is the song David writes after he finally wakes up and goes, yeah, that was not great. And there's this introduction to Psalm 51. It's not part of the song, but it's an explanation about the situation he was in. And I want you to look at this, okay? So the first line here is just the explanation. It says, to the choir master. I want you to circle that. Because this song was not just an internal David and God, I'm sorry thing. David gave this song as a pattern to the people of the kind of thing you say and do when you have royally messed up. And so he made it public. And he even says, a psalm of David, when Nathan the prophet went to him after he had gone into Bathsheba. And it begins with these words. He says, have mercy on me, O God, according to your steadfast love, according to your abundant mercy, blot out my transgressions, wash me thoroughly from my iniquity, and cleanse me from my sin. Now, I am not telling you that you need to write a song about your porn addiction and give it to Jason so he can sing it up here. It's not where we're going with this, okay? However, David was the king. And everyone knew about this. And one of the things we learn from this is that the level of brokenness in us, it needs to match in some way the level of how badly we've messed things up. See, when David slept with a woman who was not his wife and then killed her husband, his response was not, sorry, my bad, let's go have lunch. Right? There was a deep broken. And so I think we need to recognize that there is an element of looking honestly, being honest with yourself. Because we all mess up. We all make mistakes. But we are the kind of people when we make mistakes who go, you know what? Shouldn't have done that. I'm so grateful for God's grace. And I know that it's going to take some time to heal. But I hope you find the same hope in Proverbs 24 that I do. In Proverbs 24:16, it says this. And I want you to notice what Solomon is doing here. He's setting up two categories of people, the righteous and the wicked. Proverbs does this all the time. Okay? And it's not to put people in boxes and say you are fundamentally righteous or you are fundamentally wicked. He's making a contrast of a person who's following God's way in that moment and a person who's not. See? And so he says this. He says, the righteous falls 7 times and rises again, but the wicked stumble in times of calamity. Did you notice it? Remember when I was a teenager, I read this verse and I went, wait a second. We have a righteous person and we have a wicked person. Both of them fell down. Did you see that? The only difference Solomon makes between the righteous and the wicked is one of them got back up. But both of them fell down. That's the difference. So here at Grace, we take our name seriously. We take our name seriously. Now our name's a funny one because there's like 10,000 Grace churches in the world. I don't know if this happened to you. People ask me where I go to church. Oh, Grace Church. Oh, the one over here? No, not that one. Oh, that one over there down in Castle? No, not that one. And I've had even people are like, oh, that one in Minnesota. I'm like, really? You think I go to church in Minnesota? Plane ticket every single weekend. It's worth it, man. Great church. I'm sure it is a great church. But we take our name seriously, right? It's about grace. And this is what I can tell you about this place. I hope this is true in the places you're involved in your small group. I'm pretty confident it's true wherever you serve. From your staff leadership, I can confirm, I worked here for 9.5 years as a staff pastor, and in 9.5 years, there's going to be some ups and downs, right? Any job, I'm sure you know this. There are going to be times when it's going great, and there's going to be times when it's not going so great, and I had to, at times, sit in some tough meetings. Sometimes where we had to have some hard conversations with Rick and Jason and Jim when he was around and Dave when he was here. You know what I can say about those meetings? There's two things that happened every single time. No matter what conversation we needed to have. The first thing we did was we started with prayer and asked for God's guidance. And then every single time, the very first thing they said to me was, man, we love you. We appreciate you. We're glad you're here. And we want to know, what can we do better? And how can we learn? And so I just want you to know that that's the way it should be in the family of God. When we have to have hard conversations, we need to start with saying, hey, how can we learn? How can we pray together? How can we get better? So your question is this: who needs me to remind them of God's forgiveness right now? Who needs me to remind them of God's forgiveness right now? Who in your life needs you to show up and go, you know what? God's good. He forgives. He'll forgive you just like he did David. Let's take a look at Psalm 51 because there's hope in Psalm 51. Who is it? Write down a name. Maybe it's you. But who needs that reminder? And then third, as God's family, we stand up for our family when they're in danger. We stand up for our family when they're in danger. There's a book, great book in the Old Testament called Esther. Esther's a cool lady. She was the queen of Persia. And the queen, the previous queen, had been sent away by the king because of something she did. King was kind of a goofy dude, pretty selfish. I mean, when you're the emperor of the most powerful kingdom in the world, you can kind of do whatever you want. And so Esther becomes queen, and there's this guy named Haman, and he's grumpy. And by grumpy, I mean psychopathic and genocidal. So he decides that he wants to wipe the Jews off the face of the planet. He wants them all dead. It's kind of a Hitler story. And he doesn't know, and neither does the king, that the queen is one of them that he's trying to kill. And so in the course of this conversation, her uncle Mordecai comes to her and explains what's going on, and he's kind of an advisor to her. And so he says, hey, listen, you're going to have to go to the king and you're going to have to say something. Now, this is a dangerous thing because the king is not the kind of guy that you just walk into his office and go, hey, your favorite guy is trying to kill my people, and I want you to save us. She, in fact, could have been killed for approaching the king. And so she goes to Mordecai and she says this. She says, bring together all the Jews in Susa and tell them to go without eating for my sake. Don't eat or drink for 3 days and nights. My servant girls and I will do the same. Then I will go in to see the king, even if it means I must die. Esther was willing to put her life on the line for others. Now, let me make something really clear. A lot of times when we think about something like this, like Esther, we think about the big stories, the world-changing, history-shaking moments, like a massive worldwide genocide that was being attempted. And I want to make sure you understand that in those moments of history, it has been Christians over and over and over and over again who have showed up to stand in the gap and do the right thing. During the Holocaust, it was Christians more than anyone else who were helping the Jews to escape. During slavery, it was the Christians more than anyone else who stood up and said, we have to stop this. It cannot be right for a human to own another human. So at every turn and in every major moment of history, it has been Christians who have stood up and said, no, we're not going down this road anymore. And that is our heritage. That is what we do. Okay? But a lot of us, we're not going to have the opportunity in our lives to be involved in one of those big, major, world-shaking situations. We're going to be involved in the stuff that's around us, in our neighborhood, in our school. And those things matter too. And so at Grace, we show up and help. We show up and help. I would challenge you to find a situation since the day this church was founded, anywhere near here, a tragedy, a difficulty that this church was not somehow involved in helping any way we could. And now we have another down in Texas this week. We don't know how or if we can find a way. I don't know if you saw Rick's Facebook video this week, but if you haven't, take a look at it. But we're just going to stop for a second and pray because we can do that. So, Father, we're heartbroken over another shooting at another school in Texas this week. We're heartbroken for the families, for the first responders, for everyone who is affected at that school in any way. And God, we ask for your peace. Both your peace in the hearts of those who have lost so much, and peace in our country that can only come from you. In Jesus' name, amen. So we show up and help. And I want to give you just an example of what that has looked like over the last couple of years. You know, people have asked me a number of times, hey, why did you guys handle the lockdowns the way you did? If you weren't around here, you guys, I'm sure you remember 2020. My family, just like yours, watched Easter on TV that year. And for about 3 months, everything was shut down, and we closed down just like everybody did, and we did our best to do church online. But we were one of the earlier churches, one of the first, to reopen and to be back in person. And people have asked us a lot of times, why did you do that? Why did you push so hard? And they assume that it was like, flexing our muscles to the government because we're the church, or it was some stand for religious freedom or freedom of speech. But the truth is, the reason we reopened was because in the month prior to reopening, we had 7 attempted suicides in our youth ministry and children's ministry. Because you see, not everybody, when they're locked in their house for 3 months, is in a safe situation. Not everybody still has money when that happens. Not everybody gets to sit on their couch and eat pizza and enjoy a 3-month break from work. And so we reopened so that our kids would at least have somewhere to go. And we did it as safely as we could. But we reopened because we love our students and our kids. And we wanted them to have somewhere where they knew that they were loved and they weren't alone. So you got to ask yourself, who's in danger and needs my help right now? Who's in danger and needs my help right now? And maybe it's not life-threatening danger. Maybe it is for a few of you, but for most of us, it's not necessarily life-threatening danger. Maybe no one immediately comes to mind and you need to go back and talk to somebody at the booth and start serving in children's ministry or youth ministry, because I guarantee every kid in the world needs a safe and stable adult who's going to tell them that that they're loved and that they're safe. But it's interesting how God will pair you with someone who just fits you right. Where God can use what he's given to you for the good of someone else. I had an experience early on when I was teaching, and you guys probably know this about me. It's obvious even from just the last few minutes. I love the Bible, and I've had a lot of opportunity to be in classrooms with people teaching the Bible, and so I know a lot about it, and it's been a privilege in my life. And when I was teaching early on, one of the things I got to do is just sit down one-on-one with some kids who were kind of on the fringes. We had this one student, he was a sixth grader, so he was like 11 years old. He had Asperger's syndrome, which if you know anything about Asperger's and autism, there's not a lot of social connection, and school's a tough place for those kind of kids. And he was what we call twice exceptional, which means he had Asperger's syndrome, but he was also absolutely brilliant. He was a legitimate genius with a photographic memory, and this kid loved the Bible. He would just sit and read it and read it and read it. I mean, he would sit down with First Chronicles and just like memorize the genealogy. I mean, no joke. This kid was unbelievable. And so the other thing about kids like him is small talk's it doesn't really land. And so the first couple meetings, I was like trying to just talk about, whatever, and he just would stare at me until I asked what he considered to be a significant question. And so by the third meeting, I'm like, okay, no more small talk. And I sit down across the table from this 11-year-old kid. And my question to him, I'm not exaggerating or making this up. My question was, hey, of the 3 empires that conquered Israel in the Old Testament, which one's your favorite and why? That was right out of the gate. And he lit up. And for 30 minutes, no joke, he gave me his thesis on why, based on politics, military strategy, and economic theory, he preferred the Persian Empire to the Babylonian and Assyrian empires. And it was unbelievable. I learned some stuff from an 11-year-old that day about the political philosophy of the Assyrians that I didn't know. See, God is really good at pairing you up with someone who needs just what you have. So who's in danger and needs your help right now? Who needs you to show up in their life? And then finally, our family is the kind of family that sets an example of God's way when culture goes downhill. We're the kind of people who set an example of God's way when culture goes downhill. You may not know a ton about Isaiah. He's a prophet in the Old Testament. He had a very long career. He served under 4 different kings. There was a lot of up and down in his life, and there was a lot of time during his life when culture was kind of going downhill and getting twisted, and some of you guys are freaking out right now because you're looking at culture and you're like, I don't know what's going on. And the truth is, it's always been this way, okay? Culture has gone up and down and gotten more or less twisted, and most of it's just that we're seeing it. It's more obvious because we've got these phones and these TVs that scream it at us all the time. But I want to say this, and I've thought this for a long time. The church has an opportunity right now, more than we've had in decades, to be an example of what God says just by doing the normal stuff. See, more than I can remember in my lifetime, right now, just by doing the basics of what God says, just by following the easy stuff, like how you handle your money or how you are at work or what you do in your marriage or how you raise your kids, just by doing the basic stuff, that makes you really weird these days. And so we're surrounded by a culture that thinks that the normal stuff of what God says is weird. But here's what I've noticed is that over time, see, I had a professor in college that would always say time and truth go hand in hand. And over time, when you're at work and day after day, you're just doing your normal thing and you're being honest and you're not lying to people and you're not coming in every Monday and talking about your escapades over the weekend and all the things that you don't remember about what you did and all of the different stuff. When you're just living your normal life, doing what God says, at first people go, what's with you? And then after a year or two, they start going, what's with you? And then after 3 or 4 years, they start going, I think maybe I want some of that weird. Because I've run through 3 marriages. Or I never even got married, but people keep moving in and out of my apartment. Or, I'd maybe like to remember a weekend once in a while. Or you seem to have money to do the things you actually want. Or fill in the blank. See, we are a living example of the fact that God knows what he's talking about. And there's this beautiful moment early on in Isaiah's life. And it says this in Isaiah 6. This is one of the most famous passages in Isaiah. It says, in the year that King Uzziah died, I had a vision of the Lord. Now let me give you a caveat. This is going to get weird. Because Isaiah goes to heaven, and there's like angels on fire and burning coals and stuff, okay? So this is a vision of heaven, and it's a strange one. But it says, he, that's God, was on his throne high above, and his robe filled the temple. And then I cried out, I'm doomed. Okay, so he sees God and goes, uh-oh. Because he knows that like you and me, he ain't God. And it's not going to go well to be in the presence of perfection. So he says, I'm doomed. Everything I say is sinful, and so are the words of everyone around me, yet I have seen the King, the Lord all-powerful. And then this crucial moment happens. It says, one of the flaming creatures, that's an angel, flew over to me with a burning coal that it had taken from the altar with a pair of metal tongs. It touched my lips with this hot coal and said, this has touched your lips. Your sins are forgiven, and you are no longer guilty. So it's this moment of forgiveness from God, right? Through the cross, he comes to a moment of forgiveness. And then and only then, this is the crucial point. It is not until he has reckoned with his own sin and weakness that God then says, is there anyone I can send? Will someone go out there and speak for us? And Isaiah says, I'll go. Send me. And he spends his life telling the truth about how bad things had gotten. And immediately after this, you can go read the rest of Isaiah 6. God gives Isaiah a vision of what it's going to be like. And it's not good news. It's a vision of the fact that he's not going to be listened to. Of the fact that culture is just going to keep spiraling out of control over and over and over again. But because of what he just experienced, you know what Isaiah's response is? He weeps. And he says, God, is there any hope? And I want to say something. This has been the challenge to me right now about reading Isaiah 6. If you are scared about where culture is going, and you are seeing all of the twistedness around us right now, and you want to take God seriously, then don't you dare say a word until you have wept over it. That's what God says. That's the pattern, and that's the process. When you see it, it should break your heart. And then, maybe, you point out the brokenness. But only if you've seen the brokenness here first. So at Grace, we believe God's way still works. We believe with our whole heart that God's way still works. And that's why it doesn't matter who's up here talking on the weekends, whether it's me or Rick or Jason or somebody else. What you're going to hear is you're going to hear straight from the Bible. You're going to hear God's word because we think that God actually has something to say to you about your life right now. And we actually think that if you take God seriously, that your life will go in a trajectory that he wants it to go in, and it will start working way better than it is right now. And you will be one of those people that other people look at and go, I want that kind of weird in my life. You will live a life like Isaiah, where you can for 40 or 50 or 60 years walk a path that no one understands and say, you know what? He told me how to do it, and it's working. So here's your question. In what area of my life am I compromising on God's way of doing things? What's that place in your life where you're going, yeah, God, I know you have that whole Bible that tells me how to do this, but I think I can figure it out on my own. I think maybe I'm a little smarter than you. What's that place that you haven't let him speak into yet? So who are we, family? What do we learn from these four brothers and sisters? We learn that we welcome people in complicated situations. We humble ourselves. We admit when we mess up. We stand in the gap for people in danger. We set an example of God's way when culture goes downhill. And as we close, I want to read something that Isaiah wrote. See, Isaiah was given this incredible privilege. If you don't know this, he lived about 750 years before Jesus. But God gave him this privilege of watching what was going to happen 7 centuries later when Jesus finally showed up. It's one of the most unbelievable passages in the entire Bible because God is the only one who can tell us the future before it happens. And so Isaiah begins to watch Jesus. And he writes this poem about it. And he says this, he says, it was our weaknesses he carried. It was our sorrows that weighed him down. And we thought his troubles were a punishment from God, a punishment for his own sins. But he was pierced for our rebellion. He was crushed for our sins. He was beaten so that we could be whole. He was whipped so that we could be healed. You know this is true. All of us, like sheep, have strayed away. We have left God's paths to follow our own, and yet the Lord laid on him the sins of us all. 750 years before it happened, Isaiah saw it, and he told us about it. And I want to tell you that you have the opportunity to understand and to believe and have the promise of that today. So would you do me a favor? Would you bow your heads and close your eyes with me for just a minute? If you're watching online, stick with me for about 2 more minutes. You know, Isaiah told us that that sacrifice of Jesus was for us. It was for you and for me. He stood in our place. And if that makes sense to you today and you've never made that decision to place your faith in Christ, you can do it right now. You say a prayer something like this: God, I know that I'm a sinner. I've made mistakes. I've done things wrong, but I believe that Jesus died for me, and I'm trusting right now in him alone to save me. God, thank you for your forgiveness and the promise of heaven. If that made sense to you and you placed your faith in Christ today, you're part of the family now. God has adopted you, and he will never let you go, no matter what. But if that made sense to you, I would love to know that. I'm not going to embarrass you, but in just a minute, I'm just going to have you raise your hand if you're here in the room with us, just so that I can pray for you. So with heads bowed and eyes closed, if that made sense, and today for the first time you're placing your faith in Christ, saying, I believe in Jesus, would you just slip your hand up for a minute and put it right back down? Thank you. I see your hand. Just slip it up for a second, put it right back down before I pray. Well, God, we're so grateful for the examples that you've given us. We're so grateful for a family that we can be proud of. God, sometimes we're messy. Sometimes we do things that don't necessarily reflect well on you. But God, I'm grateful for these people. I'm grateful for the people that have served you faithfully all their lives. And God, we just ask that in our little corner of your world, that you would show us what it looks like to be a family that follows you and lives out the challenges and the opportunities that you place in front of us. And now as we sing, Help us to know what it is that we need to do right now, here, this week, what decisions we need to make, what habits we need to build. In Jesus' name, amen.